Welcome to another edition of Testimony Time. I'm Doug Harris, and my guest today who is going to share his testimony is Phil Russ. Phil, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much, thank you.
And I think it's fair to say, as we unpack your story, you've had many trials and many difficulties.
One or two, yes.
But you're still here walking in the Lord, and you've still experienced God through it all. And I think what you've got to share probably will be an encouragement to many, I think, that maybe feel similar situations to you.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, going back to your, let's start with your childhood. It's usually the best. Fairly difficult, fairly disturbing. Tell us something about that, what it was like growing up.
I was the youngest of five. I had three older brothers and an older sister. And I guess our family life was a bit strained, really. I think, you know, there wasn't a lot of love, you know, and affirmation, really, I think, from all of us. My dad was, well, I hardly ever saw my father, really. He was out working a lot. He was having an affair with another woman, so my mum would have to go out to work in the evening, so my eldest brother would have to sort of look after us younger ones, because there's like 10 years gap between me and the oldest brother. So yeah, it was a bit sort of strained, you know. It was my dad sort of sometimes used to get angry and aggressive, and, you know, he was like I guess my view of him was like some sort of ogre, you know, and that was my perception of him. There was no, and I'm sure deep down they did love me, both my mum and dad, but I think they just didn't know how to show it, you know. So I grew up thinking, well, you know, nobody really loves me. There's no affirmation there, no affection there. I remember one time when, as kids, there was three of us in a bed, and my mum came in and said goodbye to us and disappeared, and later I found out she tried to commit suicide. But so I think I can understand that she had it tough, but it was hard times, definitely.
And so I suppose it would be true to say you grew up not really knowing what love was.
Yeah, I'd say that was true. Yeah, I don't know what sort of love was. Sort of finding relationships quite difficult, you know, handling relationships, socialising with other people, because I also grew up sort of being told, you know, you've got nothing important to say, so just sort of shut up, you know, and then when you grow up, you sort of go in yourself a bit, you know, sort of shut the door so well, you know. And I think we, as well, growing up as well, you know, there's, you don't show emotion, you know, it's sort of this hard sort of shell on the outside, but inside you're like falling apart, really, because sort of emotion was like weak, I suppose, really. That's our perception of it. So.
And when you got to 11, I mean, I think there was a pretty horrendous experience. Share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, because of the fact that my relationship with my parents sort of wasn't very good. There was a neighbour who became very friendly with my parents, and it was to a point where they treated him like a son. And I grew to really detest this person because he had what I wanted. You know, I was their biological son, and yet they treated me completely differently, you know, as though I didn't exist. And I think they obviously got to a point where they trusted him, and it ended up, there were situations where he was left in a position of responsibility, and I'd be left on my own with him, and then obviously things got a little out of hand where he basically sexually abused me, but I felt that I wasn't really able to tell my parents because I thought they told me to shut up, you know, and how dare you accuse this person of doing that, you know, and then I get sort of smacked or something. So I had to sort of bury it. I don't really know how it came to an end, but I remember just as an 11-year-old just thinking, you know, I've just got to make sure that I'm not in those vulnerable positions anymore and just bury it, you know, and just get on with it.
How did you cope? I mean, because going through those early teenage years are difficult anyway, but you had to carry this baggage with you, this feeling of a lack of love, this sexual abuse and pushing that down. How could you cope even with your early teenage years?
Well, I just think, I just went through my early teenage years, really, and it was just, on autopilot, I think, really. I mean, I found it incredibly difficult, again, to relate to other people, relationships, especially with the opposite sex. You know, the whole sex thing I just found incredibly difficult and put off by it all. I mean, I was obviously very emotionally damaged by that, but, you know, I think as a child, well, growing up as a teenager, I guess, you just have to get on with it. But oddly enough, because I'd buried it so deep, I completely lost memory of that as I grew up in my teen, completely forgot about it till many years later when God brought it to the surface. But it was a difficult time. I mean, I did the usual teen things, you know, started to drink and smoke and down that usual sort of path. But, you know, and you try to, I suppose it's an escape, I suppose, isn't it? So, so yeah, the usual things, but yeah.
And in any of that time up until then, what was your understanding of God? What, I suppose, was your relationship with God up through your teenage years?
Well, we didn't really have any Christian instruction at home. I mean, I, you know, heard stuff through RE that Jesus had died on the cross, but I don't really feel that it related to me, to be honest with you. I mean, people who did God stuff were different people, do you know what I mean? They were odd people. You know, I guess I believed in a God of some description, but, you know, and I think I was sort of searching for something spiritual, but it wasn't necessarily Jesus and the God that I now know, so... But I think that's really it, really.
But this all was going to change, wasn't it, when, I think, soon after you turned 20 or whatever, and you had what I suppose can only be described as an encounter with God. Tell us about it.
Well, a local church put on this big tent crusade. I think they were there for about 2 weeks on this big green in the middle of the town. And I just happened to be fishing one afternoon by this local sort of pond, looking at it. I was aware of who they were because we'd had sort of a leaflet put through the letterbox saying who they were, what they were down for, and we'd seen some people in the outside Woolworths doing this singing and tambourine and guitar, you know, and mocked them with me and my friends as we walked past, just thinking, you know, these guys are complete idiots, you know. But I was sort of transfixed with this tent, just thinking, well, no, I must stop looking at it. But there was just this feeling as if God was saying, look, I want you to go there tonight, you know. And just no way, you know. But it was like a feeling that my life depended on it. So I went home and sort of prepared myself to go that evening, and so I remember walking there and walking past, you know, word that somebody might see me. But I did eventually go in and sit down, and I think what sort of caught me was the words, God loves you. And for the first time, somebody was saying, you know, God really loves you. And that really just broke my heart, really. And from that sort of point onwards, I just handed my life over to God and was quite changed. One remarkable story with that was I used to go into a cafe on a Saturday morning with my friends, and the following Saturday I went in, and obviously the lady behind the counter knew me, and I went up to order a drink, and she said, "You've been to that tent meeting, haven't you?" I said, well, yeah. I was like, well, how do you know that? She said, well, because your face looks different. And I thought, wow, you know, just all this sort of pained expression you had on your face is just gone completely. I just thought that was so amazing, you know, and a couple of months later, she actually became a Christian herself. So I just thought that was such an amazing thing for somebody to say, that they could physically see something different in my face, you know.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
because I don't think we realise what happens at that time when, as you say, you gave everything to the Lord, you invited him in, and he came in. I don't think we always realise exactly what happens. But that doesn't mean that you're perfect and every single thing gets dealt with, does it? Because even after that, I think sometime after that, you begin to get into clinical depression and even attempted suicide.
Yeah.
Tell us what developed in your life at that time?
Well, I think clinical depression has a habit, I think, of just sneaking up on you, and I think it just gradually builds up over a period of months. And I began to notice that there were signs of things were not right within me, I started to sort of do things, you know, like sit in a room with the light out, locking myself into in a cupboard and putting a knife to my throat and just wanted to sort of press it against my throat just to make a line go on. All sort of things that, you know, was quite disturbing. And I was a youth worker at the time as well. So, but I think it just progressed to a point, and I think there was a point where I used to get anxiety attacks, feel that, you know, I couldn't breathe. And then there was a point where I just broke completely. I just wanted to die. I remember sort of being on this railway bridge and wanting to throw myself off in front of a train. But I was there for ages and ages and one never came, so I wandered off in the end. But my whole life was really, at that time, was about killing myself. I just wanted to die. I hated life so much. You know, to me, I just existed. So there was no life, there was no hope. My relationship with God, I'd just gone out the window, really. There was nothing there. There was no joy, no peace, only just this complete despair, total despair. And I think, you know, you shut yourself away from people, you know, you're just obsessed with killing yourself. That's all you sort of, you know, rehearse over and over again. How am I going to kill myself? And every time I sort of failed at it, or I guess you just then thought about doing it again and sort of rehearsed it and planned it in great detail. And then, of course, to block it out, I just sort of really turned to alcohol, really, and started to drink quite excessively, along with taking medication and tranquilizers. There was, like, weekends would just disappear because, you know, I completely blottoed, really. And that was really my life for quite some time, really, just drinking alcohol, just trying to escape the moments of madness and despair. So it was a horrendous time and you know, awful.
How long did that last for?
I think in total I was ill for about 2 years. So, and it was, as I said, it was an awful experience.
Did you also at that time have guilt? Because you'd obviously had a very genuine experience of being born again of God and things have changed.
Yeah.
And now you were in this state, as you say, which because of the depression led to the alcohol, led to the drugs and whatever else you were taking. Did guilt come on top of that? Or again, did you just walk away from God and say it was all something that happened and not real now?
I don't think I walked away from God. I just felt he just seemed very distant and as though he just wasn't in this. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it was almost like this is so deep and so desperate that, you know, I'm beyond the reach of God now. But I don't know whether I felt guilty. I suppose to an extent I felt because of, to be honest with you, there are certain comments people made within the church that, you know, you really need to sort of read your Bible more and pray more, pull your socks up, and those things really were quite hurtful and it only pulled me down all the more, really. But sometimes they make me feel guilty because you think, do you know what, I should be able to pull myself out of this. You know, what's wrong with me? You know, I've got to snap out of it. But you just realise the hopelessness that there's nothing you can do about it, nothing. And so I suppose there's an element of guilt, yeah, but as I said, it was just a desperate and horrible moment where God seems a million miles away.
I'm sure there are many listening to this testimony that obviously can relate, if not fully to what you're saying, but yeah, I feel something like that. Now, the fact that you're sitting here today will already give them hope.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
How was that chain broken, as it were? How did this feeling that God's a million miles away and alter and he really sort of come back into your life?
I think really it was down to God sort of orchestrating these events to take place, really. I think I was living with this family in Bath, and I had this like little box room which was quite dark. There wasn't any windows and it was a very depressing place to be, and I think the more I spent my time there, the worse I got. So I think one of the first things was I moved out and moved in with some student friends of mine, and that made quite a big change to begin with, because I was in a very kind of friendly environment, in like we were like a family, and that changed things to begin with. The medication was stepped up, and then we moved to another house. I started college, and just over a period of months, you know, I just began to feel a little bit better. And as I started to feel better, I guess I sort of started to sense, you know, that God was actually in this. And he began to feel closer to me, you know. And I think when you begin to look back, you can see, oh, God was in that. God was in that. You can see, as I said, you know, how he's orchestrated things to happen, put people in your way, so that actually it was a series of changes. I think there was a lot of life changes that needed to take place, I think. Not just the medication, but, you know, changing parts of your life, you know, to bring about change. And I think, you know, it was a slow process, I know, but, you know, over a period of time, I just started to feel a lot better, to the point where I didn't really want to stay on the medication because it was having bad side effects. I was sort of felt really drowsy. I found, you know, my balance was a bit all over the place, and it was affecting the stuff I did because I was doing fitness at college, and I found that quite difficult.
Yes.
Feeling drowsy, you know, and not being able to sort of have good balance was quite difficult. So, but I felt, to me personally, and I'm not saying this is right for everybody, but for me personally, I was, you know, absolutely 100% certain that God said to me, I want you to just stop. And that's what I did. I just stopped taking. I just stopped taking
because
all the,
you
yeah,
felt
yeah,
quite clearly that was from God.
Yeah.
You just stopped taking the medicine.
Yeah, I just stopped taking it completely.
And I mean, naturally, that would mean you would take a nosedive on natural circumstances, but that didn't happen, did it?
No, no, it didn't. I mean, I didn't feel any effects of it whatsoever, to be honest with you. The benefit for me was the fact that I lost all the drowsiness, and obviously, you know, things changed in that way, and obviously the fact that my mental state was still, you know, sort of on a level sort of ground, really. So there was no dip in my mental state. To me, it was over, you know. So it was just about getting on with my life, really. So
God's good, isn't he?
oh, absolutely, it was absolutely.
And I mean, one of the things that obviously you hinted at, without not condemning people, but that maybe some of the people in the church where you were didn't understand what you were going through.
Yeah.
Have you been able to understand others and help others better because of what you've been through?
Yeah, I think there have been the odd person that you've been able to sort of understand. I think you just have a better understanding of, you know, I think with depression, it's one of those things. I know that, you know, you get doctors and psychologists who will come at you and talk to you about stuff, but they've got a textbook knowledge of it, you know, rather than knowing, been there. You know, and depression is one of those things. I'm sure there are other illnesses as well that you've got to really experience it to know what it feels like. And I think you're in a blessed position, if I can say that, because you're able to see right into someone. And although depression, I guess, is slightly different for everybody, there are similarities, you know, with the despair and everything. So you're able to see right into people's lives who are suffering from depression. And I think also, you know, there are obviously a lot of people within churches that probably need to have an understanding of what that's like, so that they can, you know, not do the sort of things and say the sort of stereotypical things of, you know, pull your socks up, pray more, because those things, you know, you know, concentration's gone right out the window. So any idea of praying and you know, reading the Bible, it's just absolutely no chance, you know.
And I suppose somebody that's never suffered from real depression can't understand the person that is suffering from real depression, and so they judge it on what they feel. And we really need to have that. I guess one of the great things about the Lord is he can understand us from where we are. And he could understand, and he knew what you needed. And he began to bring that into your life. You now suffer from ME. You're a catalogue of errors, aren't you? But, I mean, OK, I mention that and you sit there and you laugh. There's a lot of other people that wouldn't have that reaction. But I think you feel that instead of that illness being a blight on your life, it has really helped you in deepening your relationship with God. How's that so?
I think I've got past the stage where, because I think everybody gets to that stage when, particularly if you've got chronic illness, it's long term, and you've got it day in, day out, that you know, why God, why me, why now, you know, why won't you take this away? You know, if you're a loving Father, you'd want to get rid of this. But I got past that stage, and I think you sort of realise that, you know, actually God's in control of this, you know, and He wants the best for my life. You know, although I don't really understand why He hasn't taken away, I know that, you know, He's in control, and obviously, you know, He's an all-knowing Creator God, you know, and my wisdom isn't His wisdom, and He obviously sees something that I don't. So I think you've got to look beyond your own circumstances and look and see for it with God's eyes. And I think, you know, but with regards to my sort of faith and trust, you know, has grown deeply, because I think you become to depend on God fully, you know. And yeah, I mean, I would say my relationship has probably never been better, you know.
I mean, some people would say, you must be healed.
Yeah.
But you're not. And yet you're able to walk with God, a God that you know can heal because you've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
You can walk with God accepting the restriction that you've put upon life. Do you feel that gives you a greater understanding of the grace of God and that He's poured out towards you?
Yeah, I think you become dependent on His grace, you know. Each day you've got to pray for renewed grace and His strength to be able to do the things that you have to do during the course of the day. So there is a dependency there, so absolutely. So, because, you know, you think, I think sometimes when things are all sort of all rosy and nice, I think sometimes you can, in some cases you can lose something, I think, because you're sort of self-sufficient, you know, you don't depend on God quite so much. But when you're in a situation where, you know, things are outside your own control, you have to get to a point where you have to totally depend on God for this, because there's nothing else, you know, and, you know, your hope is completely in God. And as I said, you have to depend on God completely. It's not always easy, because sometimes it's really hard and really tough, and you get, particularly when you get really bad pain, you know, and it's really struggling, and, you know, you can't sleep properly. You know, those times it is hard, but you have to, you know, there have been times when I've been in that situation where I'm in a lot of pain and I've been bent over on the, you know, leant over on the sofa, and you're sort of managing the pain, but deep inside there's like a peace and there's a joy which is just beyond, you know, what the world can possibly understand, you know. That's just something of the grace of God really in my life, so.
I mean, it really is trusting Him in whatever circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the key there.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked earlier on, and there's obviously a lot of baggage from the past. You don't have to go into all the details, but did God have to deal at some point with that baggage and get it out so you could be freed from those things that happened in your childhood?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing thing, but I mean, I think with regards to the abuse, I mean, that God brought that to my attention a number of years later, and I was again ill at the time with a stomach problem, and I happened to be praying in my room on this particular occasion in all desperation because of the pain, and then just suddenly I had this flash, this memory flash of what happened as a child, as an 11-year-old. And I distinctly remember God saying to me, you've got to let go of this because you're carrying this person's guilt. And because that sort of came back to me in that flash, it sort of brought back all the emotion, all the feeling that I had, the guilt that I felt, because surely, you know, I should have done something about this. Is there something wrong with me because these people are doing this to me? So it was a question of just, you know, having to let go of that and give it over to God. And I guess that was a process. But, you know, I mean, I got through that, you know, by the grace of God, you know, and that's sort of completely gone, that part of my life, completely healed by that. So, but I think, you know, there's still, I guess, areas in my life, parts of my character, I guess, parts of, because sometimes I can still shut people out sometimes, you know, and not deal with emotions quite so well sometimes, but it's an ongoing process, I think.
It is, and it's good that you've learned, you know, the problem that there is there, and that when it does come up and you realise it, instead of just being, as you say, full of guilt and full of worry, you know you can take that to the Lord because you know He wants to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, one of the things you're in the process of doing is writing a book in all of this. I mean, in there, obviously, you're going to tell your story, but are you going to be able, and what would you be saying to people in how to help people like you? I mean, they may know folks in their church where they are that would be, they would look at them and say, well, yeah, well, what he's described is how I see these people. How would you help them? I mean, what advice would you give to them?
With helping people who are depressed? I think it's a difficult one, really, I suppose. It's just trying to sort of re-educate people, I suppose, on what depression's like, really. Knowing, I think some ways from reading the story and the accounts of the time where I had the depression, I think most people were probably able to begin to understand a little bit more what it's like, the kind of things, the way you feel, the things that go on. So I think anybody reading my book would probably be quite enlightened about what it's like as a depressed person. I think it's best as you're going to get, you know, really, as somebody who's not gone through depression. So I think in that respect, I'd also like to think for people who perhaps have been or going through depression or any other illness, really, I suppose it's about reaching that point where, you know, you just got to hand it over to God, really, and trust in Him, really, and know that, you know, He's the one that you have to trust in and hope for. Amen. You know, and
Phil, our time's gone.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing so much today. I'm sure it's been a great help. I'm sure many of you will be helped. Don't be afraid of what you're going through. Let God deal with it and touch your life also. See you again soon.